Welcome to the Geekery podcast, where time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana. I'm Void, and I'm here with my co-host Beej.
That's such a bad pun, and I love it so much.
I'm a dad. I get away with it. It's culturally acceptable now. Anyway.
It's true. I'm just a jerk if I say it. You're okay.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Today we're talking about gaming as we age, hence the time quote. I am going to put you on the spot first because you picked this one out of our topic ideas, and it's great. I mean, I love our talking points, and I'm excited to talk about it, but why did you pick it?
I have been thinking a lot about this lately because, especially with Overwatch coming out and how much I like it, but I didn't expect to like it. I think a lot of it has come for me in I like games where I get to be a team player now, where I used to be the one who would go against everybody. I used to be a griefer in MMOs that my entire MMO career started because I liked causing other people as much trouble as possible. And now when I saw this in our ideas, I started thinking about Overwatch and how I'm the one who wants everybody to band together, that I'm the one doing everything I can to make everyone not run in alone and just try to cause problems. I don't want to troll people anymore. And so that really made me think about how I've honestly grown up as a gamer as much as I have as a person.
Yeah, I noticed it not so much, well, Overwatch, we'll talk about that because that's definitely on topic, and I'm noticing it with that too. I noticed it a little bit earlier, probably when I started moving from like real-time strategy games to turn-based strategy games. I used to love real-time strategy games. Like I played, Warcraft 3, well, all the way back to like Warcraft 2 in the original, which we talked about on a different episode. But like I've always liked real-time strategy games. I loved StarCraft 2 right when it came out, and then I had kids not too long after that, and so that pulls you away from gaming time as well. And these days, like, if a real-time strategy game comes out, I might pick it up for the single player, but there's no way that I'm ever going to get, like, competitive level with it again. I would much rather play a turn-based game, and that's probably why I play more like Hearthstone now. It's turn-based strategy in a way. It's in a card game format, but still it's strategy and it's turn-based. I like that, and then I also find like I'm steering more and more away from twitchy games because I just don't have the time to get good at them like I used to.
And I don't know if it's time to get good at them or actual physical dexterity to be good at them. And I've wondered this as I've gotten older because I used to be really, really good at platform games, and I'm still good at them. I'm still okay. But like I will start playing Super Meat Boy or something like that when I was younger, and I love Super Meat Boy. Don't get me wrong. That is definitely the kind of game that I love right now. But it's so hard that, I know it's made to be hard, but there are things on there that I'm not sure if my fingers can move fast enough to do it. And I wonder if 14-year-old me would have been able to do it. That if it's not so much the sitting and trying and practicing over and over, but if it's the actual manual physical dexterity of my hands being able to do it.
Yeah, I think it's probably both. I think at the age we are, it's less of the physical and more of the time. And then as we get older, it'll probably shift back the other way, especially if we retire someday. When I was a teenager, I could sit down and play a game for like 8 or 12 hours every day, especially, in the summer or on the weekend. Even on school days, I would get in 8 hours of gaming on a school night and go to bed late and wake up early and whatever the next day at school. And I just can't do that. Like, I don't have the time, and I was thinking about this when the first week that Overwatch was out, I saw that somebody had hit level 100, and I had thought that I was playing a lot that week because it was like the only thing I was doing with my free time, and I was around level like 30 maybe.
I was the same way with that. That for me, I thought I was playing a whole lot on Overwatch. Jennifer had even mentioned it to me. Jennifer had told me, because I've had a history of doing the same thing that you mentioned, of just sitting for days and days or hours and hours rather, of gaming and doing that for days on end. And she was like, you need to make sure, you're playing this game a lot, that you need to make sure that you keep it under control, which is something I've asked her to do in the past. And I looked at my game time played. I'd only played 7 hours over the first week. And I'm off during the summer. I'm off work right now, and I still only put in 7 hours when she said that. And it was astonishing to me that that felt like a full, rich gaming experience.
I run into the thing too with with my family, with the age my kids are, the longest amount of time that I will get uninterrupted is like if my kids are actually asleep on time when they're supposed to be, which doesn't happen most of the time. If that happens and my wife goes out with friends at night, I might get 2 or 3 uninterrupted hours, like maximum.
Right.
And, that's maybe once every couple weeks, like every 2 or 3 weeks. Most of the time when I'm gaming, I know I'm going to get interrupted probably every 20 to 40 minutes with something. Someone's going to need something. A kid will need something, or I pull out a headphone and talk to my wife. Like I guess that's an interruption from gaming, but it's one that I like because I'd rather talk to my wife at night, and interact and, be together and discuss things. Yeah. So that's okay. Like, I'm not mad about it, but it's just the way that my life is now. I don't sit down for 8 hours and do one thing without getting interrupted, except for when I lock myself away to work during the day in my office.
And that was something I've noticed with myself as well, is that the desire to play games for that long has gone away. That as my interests have changed from solely being gaming, that as we're kids, I mean, that's what we do. If you're a gamer, you play every game that comes out. You rent a new game, you buy a new game, especially for us where we could go to the video store when there were video stores and rent games. It was fantastic, and that is what you did. I wasn't a sports player. I didn't do a whole lot of other stuff. I was either reading, I watched some TV, but I was playing games. That was the hobby that I chose to invest my time in. And now I have so many other things I would rather spend my free time on. And I don't even want to say rather, but that I need to split my free time with. That I need to go running, not because it's good for me, but because I like doing it. And so gaming has to take a side seat to at least some of that. It has to hop in the sidecar and go at least along as much as it can.
I think some of that is just it happens with maturity, that you learn how to balance your life better. I talk about being, used to sit down as a teenager and play for 8 hours straight. That wasn't good. Looking back on it, I enjoyed it. I have good memories of it. But really, from the outside now, looking back, that probably wasn't a good use of my time. I probably should have taken breaks, and gotten out and done more, or gone and hang out with friends. Well, a lot of the time I was hanging out with friends while I was playing the game. But probably 8 hours straight on a game is not a healthy decision.
And that's something that I've thought about. I actually quit playing World of Warcraft at right around the 10-year mark. That in 2004, when it came out, I'd been in one of the betas, got through, and when it launched, it basically consumed my life like so many other people's. And I had a subscription most of those. There were a few months I didn't, but most of the 10 years between 2004 and 2014, I had an active subscription of that game, and I would play it. Across the characters that I've played, I have stopped ever looking at the /played time, because the couple of times that I did, that as the years went up, I realized exactly how much time I'd invested in it, that these days, because it calculates them in days and weeks and months, not hours. So I would see this, and it actually made me sad that in 2004, I was like, heck yeah, I've spent all this time doing this, and my warlock is awesome. And then I look at it in 2014, and I'm like, I am 31 years old, and I have spent, over the last 10 years, I've spent 8 or 9 months, maybe 2 years of my life actively sitting in one place. And while I have there's the social aspect of it, and I have friends because of it, like actual friends, I wonder if that time could have been better spent. And I think that's part of the maturity in realizing that you can balance it. Whereas when you're younger, when you're 21 and WoW comes out, you live in Azeroth.
I think a lot of it just comes with maturity, like you said, looking back on it, I have great memories of it. I don't regret my time gaming, but it's just from that outside adult perspective. You look back and you're like, maybe that wasn't the best use of my time. But that's starting to get into we kind of wrote down some of the games that we used to play that we don't play now, which is what you were starting to get to. Do you want to keep going? Because you started already?
Sure, go right ahead. Well, for me, actually, a lot of them were platformer games that I don't play a lot anymore because I tend to get way frustrated at them now because I don't have the time and I don't set aside the time. Let me put it that way. I have the time because I do other things. I don't set aside the time to dedicate to be very good at them. I don't play things like Mario anymore. As much as I love them, they are fantastic. Any kind of platformer game I don't do. I actually don't play nearly as many of the Japanese RPGs, JRPGs. I don't play them very often anymore because of the extensive time commitment that comes from them. I really, really, really want to replay through Final Fantasy 6 and 9 right now, but the idea of spending that much time and playing Bravely Default the same way, I want to do it. I do. But the idea of spending 30, 40, 50 hours or more in a game kind of makes me sad right now. Sad for me because I keep looking at the grass is always greener. Like, what else could I be doing? What other games could I be playing? I could get through 2 or 3 games in the time that I got through this one. And wouldn't that be better? 2 is always better than 1. And I get really antsy about it. And it may be my anxiety, and I know that, but that's how I view gaming now. It's like I have a finite amount of hours that I can invest, and I want to spread that out. I want to experience as much as I can instead of mastering one thing like I used to. So Mario, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy games, JRPGs that I just adore, I haven't been able to make myself go back to.
That's interesting because like the main ones you're picking out here are not ones we have crossover on this topic, because I still keep JRPGs in my life. Like Final Fantasy is one of my favorite series ever. The other top series in my life is Mario platformers. So they're like my 2 favorite video game series, Final Fantasy and Mario platformers. And I play like every one that comes out essentially. So I make sure to make time for those because they're important to me. But
right.
For me, it's more like MMOs, like you mentioned. I'm on the same place there. I haven't really played an MMO since I had kids for the most part. I did take like a couple months and I dove into Final Fantasy 14 because I was doing a series playthrough. I played through every mainline Final Fantasy game in order, and I finished with Final Fantasy 14.
I'm still amazed at that, by the way. Just so you know, I'm still amazed and impressed because some people do Star Wars marathons. To do a Final Fantasy marathon, that is true dedication as a fan.
Well, I like them a lot. And like I realized that I had never played a lot of the earlier ones. So I wanted to go back and actually see the evolution of the series in order. And then eventually I got to the point where I hit I think of it as the golden age, but it's probably just because that's where I picked up the series was with PlayStation. Yeah. So like Final Fantasy 7 and above were the ones I had played before, and then I had kind of dabbled with the ones that were earlier than that. But that was really fun. I want to do a Final Fantasy podcast someday. But all of that to say, yeah. Final Fantasy is still like I will make time for that. I'll make time for a good JRPG, but I also won't waste my time on it. I will almost always use a guide to figure out the fastest or most efficient or most game-breaking way to play through it so I can experience it without having the huge cost of time. Like, I see that you have written down here games that like take 40 to 70 hours, and JRPGs often fall into that category. Most of the Final Fantasy games I beat in 20 to 25 hours.
And part of that is pride on my part that, yes, you can do that, but following a guide is something I've been principled against since I was around 16 years old, since I think it was Final Fantasy VIII was the last one I used a guide on, and I was the last game in general I used a guide on, and I only look things up if I am to the point where the game is no longer fun. That is my criteria for that. That if I'm sitting here beating my head against the wall and having a good time doing it, great. Let's do this. Let's fight this boss over and over again. Let us just do whatever it takes to have fun doing this. The moment the game becomes unfun for me, then I start looking stuff up on the internet or using a guide that way. And for me to start out following a guide step by step takes the fun out of the game for me. I love just experiencing the game and exploring things and being a part of the narrative and immersed in it. That using a guide is something that I principled myself against personally, but I can totally see how if I want to actually get through these games, I should do that.
So JRPGs are like the exception I make for this. I don't really use guides in any other game unless I'm completely and utterly stuck. Then I'll, take a look for the one part I need to get over. But JRPGs, because you can wander forever, and some of them have like very, very poor player messaging for where to go next or what to do next. I basically use a guide to tell me what's the next thing. I won't sit there and read every single line of the guide and do exactly what it tells me to do, because that takes all the fun out of it. But every time I beat a dungeon or a major boss, or I finish what I needed to do in a town, I'm obviously done with it. I will look at the guide and see what's next and how do I get there as fast as possible. That's how I got through these games quickly. So JRPGs are kind of an exception. But like I said, MMOs, I don't really play anymore. I've barely touched them at all since I had kids. The other games for me are like Counter Strike. I used to play a ton of Counter Strike in middle school into the start of high school. I had a bunch of friends that played Counter Strike also. And I had friends who were in like, I don't even remember what the leagues were or the ratings were, but they were like close to those pro level players. They would play with some of the pro level players because they had enough time and dedication. And I played with those guys a lot. So I got really good at Counter Strike. I was never at that level, but I got really good at it because I played all the time and I had the time to dedicate. And then, StarCraft, StarCraft 2, like the games that take, in StarCraft 2 terms, APM, actions per minute,
I was wondering what that was. I was going to ask.
So the pro level players talk about APM, where you have to have hundreds and hundreds of APM, right? Like, I don't remember how many, but they do measure actions per minute and see how fast you're doing everything. And that's just one of those things I just can't dedicate the time and energy to learn anymore, And then the other things are like MOBAs and twitchy shooters. And I mean, MMOs will fall into this category too, but it's basically games where people rely on me to like pull my own weight. And it's because I have kids now, because I could get interrupted at any point unless I am 100% positive that they are all the way down and sleeping and they're not going to wake up. I could get interrupted at the drop of a hat and have to step away mid-game. And if you're in a MOBA, in like a 40-minute game with 4 other players and you just drop, like I hate feeling like I'm letting them down, so I just don't even play.
That's actually something that I do in games in general, games like Overwatch or a MOBA or anything like this, MMOs. If someone asks me if they want to group up, I look at how much time I'd set aside to play the game, and I will decline an invite even for a single game. Let's say with Overwatch, since it's the most recent, but it's for a dungeon in World of Warcraft or anything as well. If I only have time for one and I can't continue chaining with them because that's what I know they're going to want to do, I'll very rarely accept a group invite for a single game because I don't want to be the guy who goes in, plays one, and then has to bail because something comes up. That I'm like, I'm only playing one game. In the middle of the day, I'll be working on podcast stuff or coding stuff, and I'll hop on Overwatch, and someone will invite me to a group, and I'm like, nah, I'm going to decline this time. I'm only in this one game, and then I'm going to leave because I know that because I've already started it, that I don't have the time set aside to get out of this game or finish this game and then move into another one to play with somebody else. I don't want to let people down from the get-go like that. I won't even jump in. Like, I'll play solo and drop with somebody, which may go back to me being a griefer in in Ultima Online back in the day, where I know there are people on the other end of that computer, but I don't care about them like I do the people who are on my friends list, let's say.
I still think it's hilarious that you were a griefer. Like, that's not you at all. In the time I've known you, that's so not your personality.
I used to be really bad about this. I would go out of my way to make sure that I knew that the other person on the end of that computer was having a worse day than they did when they logged into the game. That was my goal, to make sure that I ruined another human being's actual day through a video game. I had people who wouldn't legitimately trade with me. I was on Lake Superior on Ultima Online, and I had people who would not trade with me when I was actually trying to trade legitimate items because they knew I was a scammer. But then we were running things like, I can't even remember the actual names, where it's like these shills for people where I had my buddies come in and gate in and actually act as proxies when we had a lottery vendor where we would lie to people. We wouldn't lie to people. We have these power scrolls that give you plus 15 majory or something on there. and that there's one on here, and we figured out this whole system, and they're like, I didn't get this one, but I still got this +10 archery scroll coming back through the gate, and people are like, oh my goodness, there's real things on that vendor. So they run through and give us all of their money, or we just go as a crew and just kill all of the miners and take all of their ore and then make ourselves magic weapons. That we would do anything. I stole houses from people.
Wow.
I was a real estate slum lord in Ultima Online. I would scam people out of their houses and then go put them up on eBay.
But you're not like that at all now. This is
But I'm not like that
right?
at all.
In gaming.
This is the
while
difference.
We aged.
Whereas I've gone now, I wanted to murder people and steal their houses was my entire gaming motivation when I was 18 years old. And now all I want to do is work as a group and support the other people. I don't even like being the tank that much or the damage dealer, because I want to be the support or utility characters in something to be able to make sure that other people are performing well. I want to be the bard. I want to be the Symmetra. I either play a druid or a discipline priest, and I pick classes to help other people as much as I can now. That is my personality now in gaming, and it was absolutely not when I was younger.
I think this kind of ties into, I mean, we were talking about this the other day, and like competition just isn't as interesting as it used to be. Like I feel like
it's not.
Like competition against other real people online, it used to be a driving thing as a teenager, like to get better and prove you're better than other people. And I don't have that drive at all now, like at all. I would much rather play co-op. But, you know, we're playing Overwatch, and, you know, there are people who get like mad when you're losing, or you use a hero that you're trying to learn and they're like, oh, you suck with them. Why are you playing them? You know, just quit. Like there are people who are mean online. And I'm like, you know, I probably would have been like that in this game if I were, you know, way younger, like when I was a teenager. And I don't
guarantee I would have been.
Yeah, and I don't care now. Like I'm legitimately in it to have fun. Just kind of play the game and enjoy it for what it is. Part of it is probably also the reward structure set up in a game. There used to be games with a lot less reward structure. It was all about the competition, like Counter Strike. You know, when I played that, you weren't going to unlock anything. You didn't get experience. There weren't actual levels. Like, it sounds weird because every game has those RPG mechanics now. You can gain levels, you can unlock items, you can get new cosmetic gear, but that didn't used to exist. Now that exists, and so the reward structures are interesting because this is why I don't play Hearthstone as much as I could be playing it. Hearthstone is set up with daily quests. You have 3 daily quests at a time if you let them build up. Almost all of the daily quests are win a game as this hero. Almost all of them. Win 3 games with this hero, win 5 games with this hero, something like that. It's about winning. You have to win to get the reward, right?
Yeah.
With Overwatch and with Heroes of the Storm, the incentive is to play the game. For Heroes of the Storm, it's play around with this type of character. It's not win around with this type of character. It's play around with this type of character.
And it even counts on Heroes of the Storm, I found out. If you disconnect from a game by accident and log back in, that counts as one of your games. I completed daily quests when I didn't think I was going to, because playing it is actually just going in and literally playing in that game, not even completing it.
Yeah, and I love that. And like that's one of the reasons I really, really like Overwatch right now, because you get experience, and then every time you get whatever X amount of experience, you level up.
Yep.
And every level you get a loot box, which gives you random, you know, they're all cosmetic. Like none of them affect gameplay. They're all just cosmetic goodies. And the bulk of your experience points come from time played in the game. You get a little bit of a bonus if you win, but it's like little, you know?
Right.
For the most part, the vast majority of your experience comes from just time in the game, which just encourages you to play more. Like, you don't have to win to advance. And that makes a huge difference in my willingness to play the game. If Hearthstone switched over their daily quest to be play 3 games as this class, play 5 games as that class, I would play so much more of it.
That's one of the reasons that I moved away from Hearthstone, is because I wasn't playing the flavor of the month decks, that I wasn't going to play the 2 or 3 decks that were put together to completely dominate everybody. I played decks that I had fun with that had decent win rates, but for the most part, I wasn't getting any rewards. I would get frustrated because my gaming time, I needed to save up gold and I couldn't do it because I couldn't get that last win in. So I just gave up. I didn't want to play 6 games on a losing streak and not be able to complete my daily quest before I went to bed.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see just like how developers can, I mean, it's just these small changes to the way that they structure their incentive system, and it can make a huge difference for an adult gamer's willingness to keep playing that game over time.
One thing, going back to where you were talking about the using a guide, the idea of incentives and using a guide, that completing the game at that point was the incentive. You know, experiencing that story is the incentive for the JRPGs, let's say.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you feel about difficulty levels? Because it took a long time for me.
Crank it down. Go down to easy, go down to casual. I do that all the time now, and I enjoy my gaming so much more because of it. Not in every game, but in a lot of games. I will crank it down to, you know, sometimes they even have like a story experience mode, which is like lower than casual. I've played games on that and had a fantastic time.
Yes, because the fun is from playing the game, not being punished by the game. The only game in recent memory that I can think of that I turned the difficulty up on was actually Disney Infinity. Leveling up characters on it, and you get to a certain point where on medium or easy, it really is just button mashing. And if you put it on hard, or maybe there's an extreme, at this point I can't remember, whatever the couple of higher ones are, you have to think about what blocking and moving around a whole lot more, where it wasn't, and there's not a penalty for death so much as you place your figure on the stand, or if you're in a toy box, you automatically respawn, where it was more fun that way because I wasn't being punished. And I think for me, I will crank it down on difficulty if I'm being punished for loss.
Yeah, for me, it's more about being able to do the critical path without getting interrupted. So I won't always do it. If the game is about the gameplay, I will leave the difficulty usually on whatever like the normal setting is, you know, because that's usually what the developer intended.
Right. I start on normal.
Yeah. So for games like Fire Emblem, like I love the last couple Fire Emblem games because they added a few nice things for like people like me who want to play through and not be punished. So games like Fire Emblem, like that are more about the gameplay, like the strategy level, I'll try to leave those at normal and play them the way that they're intended, you know, because it's more about the gameplay. Games that are more about telling a story and getting through a narrative experience, those ones I will mess with. I will either crank them down to easy or I'm trying to think. The most recent one I did was The Witcher, and for The Witcher 3, I had never really gotten into the other two because I didn't like the combat, and everyone told me that The Witcher 3 was amazing for story and world building, so I wanted to play it for that, but I did not want to deal with the combat, especially after playing for like the first hour or two normally and actually seeing what the combat had to offer. So what I did is I went in and like enabled console commands, and I just cranked my level up to the absolute maximum, and I played through the entire game that way, and I had a fantastic time with it. I loved it.
Because you experienced the part of the game that you enjoyed. You played a game, you didn't fight against a computer.
Yeah, I basically didn't have to deal with the combat. Like every combat encounter, I could just fly through, no problem. And I got to enjoy the game for the narrative and the world building and the exploration and all the parts that I wanted without having to worry about this combat that I just didn't enjoy.
That was what happened to me in the first game I ever recognized myself doing. That was the original Mass Effect, because I chose my class poorly. I chose a psionicist, I believe is what it was called, where all you have is a pistol and you have a bunch of psionic powers like singularity and black holes and gravity power.
Yep.
And I was terrible at this. It is hard to play when you're bad at shooters anyway with no aim, and those take a lot of skill to use. I didn't really understand what I was doing at the time. I cranked it down on easy and it was much better. If I may not have had to on something else, but I could not get through certain areas of that game in combat as that class.
Yeah, man, pick Soldier all the way. I played through Soldier all the way on Mass Effect, and it was fine. But yeah, no, I know. If you pick the wrong class, especially in Mass Effect 1, it can be very, very difficult.
I was in college, and that one of my friends, Bob, I love Bob. Bob is the most hardcore gamer I may have ever met, in terms of he will not, or at least he wouldn't, I don't know if he has lately or not, but he would not crank down the difficulty on anything. He had to get the achievements. He had to do it the way that it proved that he was the better gamer. Silent Hill 3 is wonderful. It's a great game on the PS2, and it has difficulty settings that go all the way up to Extreme 10, and you have to unlock them by beating each successive difficulty level. So you can start at medium or normal, move up to hard, then move up to extreme, then you have Extreme 2, Extreme 3, all the way up through 10. And you get a star rating at the end of this game. It's affected by things like time, how long it takes you to get through the game, and how many times you save during this. And once you get to extreme, you have no extra lives or continues. Once you die, you die. It's basically permadeath on the extreme difficulties. Bob would not save his game because it affected his star rating at the end. And so we sat and we watched him play through, say, Extreme 9 or Extreme 10. We watched hours of him doing this. It was fantastic. But I remember just screaming when he had a bad minute and got killed near the end of the game. And since he didn't save it at all, he had to go restart the entire game back, which was around 5 or 6 hours, I think, at that point. Maybe it was 2 or 3. I have no idea. But whatever gameplay he had put in to get to the next difficulty level was completely wiped out because of chasing the star rating and achievements. And at the time, I thought that was awesome. I still kind of do think that's awesome, that kind of dedication. But I look at it now and I'm like, I could not do that. That is something that I would never be able to do to myself, is completely and totally invest in simply being better at that game than actually having fun with it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like why the Dark Souls games don't appeal to me. I mean, it's not necessarily permadeath. Maybe a better example is going back to Fire Emblem. I didn't play the early Fire Emblem games because they have permadeath for all your characters, and that's default, and there's no way around it.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's brutal. The first Fire Emblem for 3DS, Fire Emblem Awakening, is the first time they put in an option to not have permadeath, and that's when I got into it.
And one thing I wanted to talk about regarding the idea of competition here is that playing Overwatch the last couple of weeks has made me realize how little I care about winning. That we were talking about so many people getting upset about it, and I really don't care. I do not care if I lose. I get frustrated at individual kills, but I don't care if I win or lose that game because it's just fun to play. There will have been moments during that game that I really and truly enjoyed myself. There has rarely been a game that I just thought was just like the entire time.
Yeah, for me, the only time I notice now is if we've gone on like a 15 or 20 game losing streak, which never happens. At that point, I might throw in the towel and be like, I might be done for the night. But generally, if someone's like, oh man, we've lost the last 5 games in a row, I'm like, oh, really? I legitimately did not notice that.
Nope. And the only thing that I've even noticed about that is whenever it is a close game and I lose, where you can see the amount of space that there is to move the payload or stop the payload, and it's in about the 1 to 3 zone, then I don't care about winning. But when I lose or win, that's when I either celebrate or go, oh no, kind of thing.
Yeah, like I had a game the other day where we had legitimately more than 5 minutes of overtime capturing. It was one of those capture and hold maps where the point can go back and forth between 2 teams. It was tied up. We had both won 1 game. This was the last game of the series, and we kept trading the point back and forth in overtime for over 5 minutes. It was crazy. But yeah, I know what you feel. That's when you either are celebrating or you're like, no, why?
Yeah.
But it's still, then you just move on to the next game.
Exactly. I start up the next game regardless, or maybe I go to the bathroom and stand up and stretch my hands out, my arms out a little bit, but I'm not rage quitting if I lose. I don't throw my mouse into my monitor and swear off the game. I just don't care about winning or losing at this point.
Yeah. So we talked about kind of a lot of what's changed from being a teenager to now, but I want to talk about more of like what we do play now. We kind of mentioned this, but like I really like co-op now. I play a ton of co-op games, and I wish there were more of them in video games. It's more of a board gaming thing for me. Pandemic Legacy is probably the greatest board game I've ever played. It's entirely a co-op game. You play through a fictional year, and like events happen and change the game dynamically as you go along throughout the year. So it starts out as kind of a basic pandemic game, and then by the end of your first game it's already different, and by the end of the year it's so completely its own like campaign and story that's happened to you and your group. It's amazing.
I've never played Pandemic or any of those, but that sounds really cool.
Yeah, we should talk about board games someday and just like board games the whole podcast. But so like there are other ones like there's a deck builder that's cooperative that's Marvel themed called Legendary.
Okay.
That one is really fun co-op. There's a Lord of the Rings LCG, which if you don't know what an LCG is, I can talk about it more in depth when we do a board game podcast. But an LCG is a living card game as compared to a collectible card game. Basically, every expansion or pack you buy for a living card game, you know exactly the cards that are in it, and you only have to buy it once. Like, you're not going out buying booster packs trying to get the last cards and complete your collection. So LCGs are cool. The Lord of the Rings LCG is totally a co-op game. It's super fun.
Now, I've played the Lord of the Rings when Austin has it. My co-author, he has it, and it is great. We started playing the LCG of Netrunner, where it's competitive against one another, and then he bought the Lord of the Rings LCG that's cooperative, and it was really interesting to me just to see. That was my first experience at playing a co-op card game working at these goals, and it was really cool.
Yeah, they're super fun. Co-op board games are fantastic, and like I wish it would bleed over to video games a little bit more, but I think we'll get there. I mean, I've seen more of it recently. I think given time and like just developers getting older like we are, I think there's going to be more draw towards co-op instead of all of this competitive all the time. The only other like main co-op thing I wanted to draw attention to is tabletop RPGs, and I kind of wanted to ask you about it because I haven't played a whole lot of them. But I do like listening into Dungeons and Dragons podcasts and Dungeons and Dragons live events and other tabletop RPGs because they are essentially co-op storytelling. You know, you're not really fighting against the DM, you're working with the DM to tell a story, and I find that fascinating.
It is lovely and wonderful to do. I love tabletop RPGs. Although at the time when I played the most of them, I was in my griefer phase. And there was one particular time when we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, one of my friends was trying to rob me from a set of gem pouch that I had. He was trying to like pickpocket the gems out of my bag, and he critically failed on it, or he failed his roll. I don't know if it was critically failed. And the DM told me that, you know, you guys, you find his hand standing like stuck in your pouch. What do you get? You grab it, and what do you do? What do you do? And so I grabbed his arm, and I reached into my pocket. We were also at this point sneaking around some like demon mastiffs or something. I can't remember what they were. They were in D&D 3.0. And I reached in. For some reason, I had a dog whistle in my pack. So I told him that if he didn't let go, I was going to blow the whistle and call all over those demon dogs. And he didn't let go. So I blew the whistle and almost got our entire party killed because he wouldn't not steal my shinies. That's where I would still take it to ruin someone else's day, even when we're supposed to be working together for the same quest.
Yeah, that does not sound like the games that I've listened to. Most of them are very much like working together to tell an interesting story.
Yep.
That could be fun someday to like do a dedicated campaign and turn it into a podcast or a video series or something. That's kind of on my list of something I might want to try eventually.
That would be super cool.
Yeah, I just did my first DMing ever like a month or two ago for my kids. I kind of found Yeah, I showed you a little bit about this. I found like a kind of a homebrew system for kids who are like, 5 to 10. And my kids are, well, my daughter's right in that range, but my son is younger than that. So I kind of toned it down even further and made my own homebrew system out of it. And I just used it to get them to explore and tell a story. And that was really, really fun for me. So that was kind of my first taste of DMing. And I was like, this might be something I want to try as a side project in the future.
That would be a wonderful idea. Oh, if you had a podcast with your kids doing that, that would be wonderful to listen to.
They'd have to be older, but that might be in the cards someday. That could be cool. I guess I
That
did
would
want to
be
talk
cool.
about like just gaming as a parent too, because that's been a big swing for me over the last, from 10 years ago to now. Being a parent, a lot of my gaming has moved from long sessions into short bursts, which is kind of just part of being an adult too. We already talked about that,
Yes.
not having marathon sessions anymore, but even less so, like I said, I will get interrupted probably every 20 to 40 minutes. That's very regular, no matter what I'm doing throughout the day, unless I'm locked in my room doing work in my office. Besides that, like, I'm going to get interrupted. So it's one of those things where you have to start learning to live with it and not fight it or be upset about it. Basically, games with like a quick save or a sleep mode become key, and that's how I beat like the Final Fantasy series. I played all of those older games on iOS on the mobile version because they all have quick save, and I can just hit 2 buttons, have a quick save, and then like go help my kid or put it down and go help my wife with something. Like that was important to me. That's also probably why my 3DS is my most played console. Like we talked about Nintendo last week.
Yeah,
because 3DS has a sleep mode. I literally just close the clamshell of it and it's asleep right where I left off. So I can close it and then go help a kid. And then whenever I get back to it, if it's 5 minutes later, if it's 5 hours later, if it's 5 days later, it's still there in the same state,
And it doesn't matter whether whatever you were doing finished at that point. It could be in the middle of an animation or a cutscene, and it is going to resume immediately. That has been wonderful to be able to have my 2DS somewhere at the doctor's office, at slow times at work, or anything like this, where I had a couple of minutes. I knew I wasn't going to have more than 5 minutes of time. I was like, I need some me time, and somebody needed something, knock on the door. It was my turn at the queue or whatever, click the button, and no matter what, I'm done. You don't have to be like, crud. Like with Hearthstone, I've lost games because of trying to play them when I'm out, and I just had to turn it off. There was nothing I could do.
Yep. Yeah, I totally get that. And like I said, I mean, there are some good mobile games that have been like ported to mobile. Like all of the Final Fantasy games are fantastic. I played a couple Dragon Quest games on there. Games that I've spent, 20 to 30 hours with over the course of I don't know how long, but in like 5 to 10 minute bursts, because that's what fits with my lifestyle very easily right now.
Yep.
It's also what makes it harder to do things like, well, Overwatch is pretty good because Overwatch rounds are usually like 15 minutes, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But like even Heroes of the Storm is usually 20 to 30 minutes, and that becomes a little bit too long because I'll usually get interrupted. It's very rare to play an entire round of that without getting interrupted. It's one of these things where my daughter now is smart enough and she gets gaming enough and she's old enough. She will ask me, Dad, does this game pause? And like when your kid can ask you that, like they know what's going on. They know where your attention is, right? So I try not to play Overwatch if they need me, or play like, online games that are multiplayer where I can't just drop out of it. And at the end of the day, if they do need me, I will just drop out of it. But she's also old enough now that if she needs something, it's usually not I'm screaming in pain and I need something, you have to drop everything. It's usually, hey, I need something. Can I talk to you about this? And she'll say, Dad, does this game pause? And it'll be like, no. She's like, can I sit and watch you till you finish this round? Yes. Like that's usually how it goes with her these days. With my son, it's like, I need something. And I'm like, okay. And I drop whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. But that will not be the case for much longer, hopefully.
Right. It's one of those things that comes with age for them. And it's like, she knows that if she needs me, I will always drop what I'm doing. But it's also cool because she gets into the games that I'm into. She'll like watch Overwatch, and she has a favorite character now. It's Diva. And, she'll be like, can you switch to Diva at least? And I'll be like, yeah, sure. I'll switch to Diva for you. Things like that are really, really fun with her. But yeah, I mean,
even if there are already 3 Divas on the team, which I've seen today,
you'll
switch to the 4th. I don't think you can.
No. Diva's a good character. It's fun. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely different gaming as a parent. I mean, even when she was little, like if my wife was sleeping, I remember the first game I played after she was born was Halo Reach. And I just remember her as like a tiny, tiny baby. I would sit on our couch cross-legged and put her in my lap, and she'd just sleep because, like, if you don't know, if you've never had a newborn before, newborns basically just sleep all the time, and then every once in a while they need your attention for like 5 minutes, and then they go back to sleep. And it's usually because they just need to eat, maybe need a diaper. They sleep like 18 hours a day. Seriously, like you just set them down and they stay wherever they are. So I would put her in my lap, and then I would like put my arms around her and grab the controller, and I played Halo Reach. That's how I beat all of Halo Reach, was with my daughter in my lap when she was like a newborn.
That is freaking lovely. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. But I mean, it's like you can be a parent and be a gamer. You just have to switch it, you know? Things change, but it's okay. And I mean, that's why I played through like all the Final Fantasy games on my phone, just because I can pick it up and put it down so easily. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, but I played 1 through 6 when I was doing my playthrough. I played all of those on my phone, and it was a perfect fit. I loved that.
And for me, a lot of stuff that you hit on exactly what I was thinking about with games that I still play are games that have quick save features. That is number one for me. I don't have kids, obviously, but my attention span goes away. I start playing a 30-minute session, and focusing for 30 minutes on anything, on just that game, is actually very hard for me, that I want to automatically tab out and do something else. That if an Overwatch game, I don't tab out even when I'm dead, because they last for 10 or 15 minutes. But when I start getting into a long Heroes of the Storm match or a super long Hearthstone match, I'm tabbing out and doing something else. And in a single player game, it's super important whenever I get bored, whenever I want to quit playing this game or need to quit playing this game for whatever reason, that I can quit right then, or I'm going to lose a bunch of playtime from just bailing on it, or I'm going to resent the game and not go back to it because I remember not having fun and having to slog along to the next checkpoint just because it made me. That I tend to play games with quick save features because of my own attention span rather than my kids.
Yeah, I can see that too. That's definitely like, you just feel all the other things you could be doing, or just, adult life. Like sometimes you feel like you should be doing something else, even though you're trying to relax. And like you kind of pull yourself away to check on, I don't know, responsibilities, I guess is the way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So with all of this being said, like what games and series do you still love to play? Because for me, it's like, I kind of talked about it already. For me, like Mario platformers, I will always pick up the next Mario platformer and I will love it. And I will destroy that game in like 2 days because I'm really good at them by now. And then like most of the Mario games in general, like Mario Kart, Mario Party, Mario, whatever.
Yeah.
I usually end up picking them up and having a really good time with them. Besides that, my other big series that I absolutely love is Final Fantasy. I will always play the new Final Fantasy that comes out and make time for it. And then lately, I mean, Overwatch has gotten a ton, like all of my gaming time for the last 2 weeks, but it's gotten a lot of my just general thinking and like attention because it's not a twitchy shooter. I don't really play team-based shooters that are twitchy anymore. There are a couple characters in Overwatch that if you have those Twitch skills, it will be a big improvement. But there are so many characters that you don't need the Twitch skills for, and you can play fantastically. So Overwatch has a lot of my attention because it's a team-based game that's not twitchy.
That you can bail on if you have to, or will be done very quickly. Like it hits all of your main points, I think.
It hits all of those things I've talked about, yeah.
Except for narrative, which we talked about last week, where they've set up the external narrative to be able to check out so that is still there for you. So yeah, it pretty much hits everything you care about.
Yep, and I didn't really hit the fact that I like my narrative in single player games and I like my gameplay in multiplayer games.
Yes.
And that's fairly consistent across the board for me. If I want a good narrative, I want it a single player experience that I can sit down and do on my own time with my own, quick saves and like all that kind of stuff, turn the difficulty to whatever I want. All of these things I've talked about. I try to keep that separate from my multiplayer gaming. Like I don't really need narrative in my multiplayer experiences. Multiplayer should just kind of be about the gameplay.
I thought I wanted narrative in my multiplayer experiences. I thought that Star Wars The Old Republic was going to be the best thing in the world for me, and it turns out that it just plays like a single player game where other people are running around you as well. And I never read quest text in World of Warcraft or EverQuest unless I was looking for keywords. Nothing like that did I ever care about the actual narrative and story that was being told outside of just a few minor moments. But I cared about the gameplay in multiplayer games. I'm exactly the same way. I cared about PvP, and I care about interacting with other people way more than I care about the story that particular development team is trying to tell.
So like with all that being said, and like all of the things that both of us have said we like and don't like about games now, what about you? Like, what are the games that you still play or like really have a special place for you?
I'm always going to get the World of Warcraft expansions. I don't think it is going to be possible for me until that game goes offline to not get the expansions. I don't have an active subscription right now, but I know when Legion comes out and the pre-release events are going on that I will have an active subscription, and I will be playing in the rush of people that are coming back. I will experience all the content, maybe the first rating tier, and then I will abandon ship again because I care about the content and my characters, and the people, I can interact with, and the people I know will be coming back, but I don't necessarily care about being there for the next 2 years or so waiting on the next expansion, which also goes into, Bioshock and Elder Scrolls are two of the other series that I'm hooked on now. I will get any Bioshock game and play through it. May have to put it on easy. I may not be good at it, but I love the way that the Bioshock games tell stories, and I love the way they integrate the gameplay with the stories. So just everything about them, I'm sold. I'm hooked, and they have a quick save feature that I make use of liberally. And the same thing goes for Elder Scrolls. Whenever I got Skyrim, I've gone back and played some of Oblivion, but Skyrim has sold me on whatever the next Elder Scrolls game is going to be. I'm going to be there on release day doing it because it plays like the kind, even though it is a super long game and I can waste 200 hours in it, I'm probably not going to, but I'm still going to feel fulfilled because of the way that I can play the game that I want to in a world that I legitimately care about.
It has quick saves too, just like Fallout.
It does have
and
quick
other
saves.
Elder Scrolls games. Those quick saves make a huge world of difference to me.
That's why I play it on PC. I don't know if you can do it on the PlayStation or Xbox with quick save, but one of the reasons that I play these on PC is because a lot of them have the F9 or F11 or whichever one it is as quick save. That has sold me on as a platform.
I think it's F5.
Is it F5? I don't know. I press one of the buttons and I just go do other things. So
exactly. It's quick save. You have a quick save button. Cool. Well, this was kind of a fun, meandering topic, but I feel like we got to talk about a lot of just kind of where we're at with gaming and where we were and where we're going and what we like. So this was a cool topic.
It was.
Let's get into our weekly geekery. If you don't know, weekly geekery is where we share what we've been geeking out about this week. I usually go first. I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, go first. Well, I've got two this week where I've really been. I usually have a hard time on picking out what exactly has been going on, but this week I've been thinking a lot about Reddit. I avoided Reddit for a long time because it can be very toxic in certain communities on there. And at your suggestion, I went and found good subreddits with good people in them where they just want to have discussions about things that they love. And I found a lot in the running and cycling and fitness areas where I think Lose It as well, and just Overwatch, of course, at this point. But I love it. I haven't seen a lot of the toxicity and flaming that I didn't like before and trolling. So I'm definitely looking at Reddit and trying to become a part of these different smaller communities. And then I've also been listening to the 10% Happier podcast with Dan Harris. I love 10% Happier. There is nothing that company, that franchise can put out that I will not be a fan of, because if there is one property that I can say is responsible for my mental well-being, it's 10% Happier. Dan Harris, through this, I think the way he calls it is mindfulness meditation for skeptics, where basically he takes the tenets of Buddhism and meditation and mindfulness and applies it without the spirituality and shows you how this is scientifically good for your body. And I downloaded the 10% Happier guided meditation app, and that really helped soothe me and my anxiety and get me through one of the roughest times of my life, was being able to turn to this app, sit for 15-20 minutes and learn how to focus on my breathing, on myself, and really take the time to be just to be well, honestly, to help myself be well. So it really helped me. And I discovered this week that there's a 10% Happier podcast that I somehow missed. So I've been listening to it rather than Hamilton. It is, outside of our network's podcasts, it is the only thing I've listened to since I discovered Hamilton. So that should be a very big indication of how good it is.
That's cool. No, that's like a rousing endorsement for it, obviously. I should check that out because I listen to a lot of podcasts and it sounds like something I'd be interested in. I'm going to tangent before I get into my weekly geekery because you talked about Reddit. I would like to give the listeners the same advice I gave you. Reddit is a forum. If you don't know what Reddit is, it is probably the biggest forum on the internet. Reddit can be toxic. Reddit can be amazing. It is probably my favorite website. It is where I spend the most time when I'm, sitting at a computer just online, just kind of browsing. I just go to Reddit generally. Here's the trick to Reddit. It's the biggest forum ever. If you've ever been into a forum, you know how toxic they can get when there's a lot of people there. Make your Reddit account. Make one, right? If you don't make a Reddit account, all you are ever going to see are the default subreddits on the homepage. Make your Reddit account. Unsubscribe from every single one of those default subreddits. Do not resubscribe to them. They will make you miserable.
Yes.
This is the advice I gave to you. Do not subscribe to the default subreddits. That's where so many people are. You cannot help but run into toxicity. Instead, go find subreddits that you're interested in for topics you like. Do a deep dive onto all the topics that you want to hit, right? Don't subscribe to /r/gaming. Subscribe to /r/ patient gamers, for people who are willing to wait for a game to drop in price to finally get around to it. Or subscribe to the Overwatch subreddit because you're really into Overwatch right now. Or if you're like Beej, subscribe to whatever the cycling one is called. I have a ton of subreddits that I visit, and as long as I keep those default subreddits out of my subscriptions, I love the site. So if you've heard bad things about Reddit and you've never actually tried to make an account and find your own subreddits within it, I really suggest it. It can be a fantastic site if you take a little bit of time to make it that way.
And I never took that time, and I did the deep dive that you suggested, and instead of finding, say, /fitness, which is full of a lot of dude bro gym rats, a lot of good stuff too, but there are the dude bro gym rats on there, I found things like /r/running lifestyle, which is kind of like the patient gamers to gaming, where it's people who are runners and living life and just talking about things like that rather than race reports or nutrition information and things like that, where things that I legitimately care about on there. So yeah, you are absolutely right. Unsubscribe from the defaults, get rid of them, and never look back, because they're piles of acid that you fall into and burn your face off.
Especially politics. Okay.
Oh,
anyway,
just don't.
I don't even want to get into it. My weekly geekery. I've been doing E3 prep for Video Game News Now, which is another podcast on our network. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead. It's me every weekday, and I tell you the video game news. I wasn't actually thinking through when I launched the podcast a month before E3 started. So now that I'm kind of up and running, now I have to figure out how I'm going to deal with E3. I think I'm actually going to take every single big press conference and make it into its own podcast and just throw them on the feed whenever I get done with them instead of my normal release schedule. E3, If you don't know, it's the biggest gaming news week of the year. It starts, it kind of already started because there's tons of leaks coming out this week, but really it starts on Sunday with the press conferences, and the major press conferences go Sunday through Tuesday, and then the show runs a couple more days where journalists can get on the show floor. So next week's going to be crazy. If you want to keep up with the video game news, subscribe to Video Game News Now, because I'm going to be dealing with that for you. I'm kind of excited and I'm kind of terrified.
I'm very excited about this because I get overwhelmed by E3 to the point where I scroll through Twitter, see the same 5 things over and over again, and miss a lot of the other stuff. That honestly, your podcast, I'm your target audience for this one as well, because I will not put in the time and just look at headlines on one of the gaming sites at some point 2 weeks from now to see what happened at E3. I will not keep up with it. I've never been able to keep up with it as it goes on because it's too hectic.
I will help you out. And then the other thing, my main weekly geekery this week, I am going to do a run in the Final Fantasy V 4-job Fiesta. And I know I told you about this, but I don't think I told any of the listeners about it. Like I talked about today, I really like Final Fantasy as a series. Final Fantasy V, if you've never played it, it's the first one where they really flesh out a job system. And the job system is basically when you get to key points in the story, in this game in particular, it's when you get to these crystals in the story, you unlock a new set of jobs. And you can equip those to your character. Your characters can learn any job and they can level that job up and gain skills in it. So you play through the game, you mix and match jobs. You find combinations that work for you and cool synergies, and you beat the game, right? The 4-job Fiesta is like a charity run where you say, okay, I'm going to participate, I register, and then you play the game. And when you get to the first crystal, you tweet at this Twitter bot that they have set up especially for it. You say, I'm at this crystal, and the bot will give you one job from that crystal, and that is the only one you are allowed to use from that crystal. And you have to equip it to all your characters. And then when you get to the second crystal, you do it again, they'll give you a second job, and now you have 2 jobs that you can mix and match. By the time you get to the 4th crystal, you will have 4 jobs assigned, you have to have 1 on each character, and that's how you have to complete the game. Anyone can join for free. It's kind of a cool challenge run. The charity part comes in 2 ways. Before it starts, which is still now, we're about 4 days out as I'm recording this. When you guys hear it, we'll be about 3 days out or so. Before the event starts, people can donate money for Berserker Risk. And every $10 the charity gets means that somebody who has said they are willing to do a run with Berserker Risk is going to get 1 Berserker. And Berserkers make runs very difficult, which is why they do this. So the more money people donate, the more difficult it becomes for people who are willing to take that risk.
What exactly do Berserkers do to make it harder?
Berserkers attack all the time, and you have no control of them.
Okay.
Yeah, they are super strong, but you don't actually control a Berserker. A Berserker attacks every single round, and you don't get to control it.
So 4 Berserkers. My goodness.
You could get 4 Berserkers. It has happened. But I mean, you're basically just saying, I'm willing to risk a Berserker, and you might get one, depending on how much money people have donated. The other part of the charity comes in, if you really get stuck and you cannot progress further with the jobs that you have, you can go and you can donate a little bit of money to change one of those jobs out. If you're totally roadblocked, and I've talked to people who've done this a bunch of years in a row, they say that you're never truly roadblocked if you put in enough time. But if you want to, you can always go throw a couple bucks at it, and they will let you change 1 or 2 or however many of your jobs if you donate to them. So it's a charity run for Child's Play. It's Final Fantasy. It's a lot of the things I love because Child's Play charity is really cool also. So yeah, I'm prepping for that. That starts next week. If any of the listeners out there want to do a run, let me know on Twitter, because I will be doing a run and I would gladly talk to you about your run, and I will gladly help cheer you on, and you can help do the same.
I was going to say cheerlead them. Yeah, you'll be their cheerleader.
So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure that the 4-job Fiesta will be in my weekly Geekery for a couple of weeks running here coming up. So I will keep you guys in the loop and let you know how it goes.
And there are people who stream this that you'll see it on Twitch and other platforms, probably YouTube, but you don't have to stream it. It's not a requirement. I would have loved to have seen your stream and donated for some Berserkers, but you're going to be playing it on your phone, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm going to play it on the iOS version because I'll probably mostly play it on my phone, but then the iOS version also has a cloud sync. So I'm going to also probably play it on my iPad when I actually have time to sit down and do a long session. Otherwise, I'll just be picking away at it on my phone, little bits here and there, like we talked about today.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's about it for the week. You can write to us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. Our email address, as always, is geek2geekcast@gmail.com, or reach us on Twitter collectively at geek2geekcast. If you want to email updates about any... Whoa, this is new. This is a new part to this outro.
I added it. I confused you. I'm sorry.
I just started reading it without even... No, it's yours. You wrote it. You can read it for the very first time.
Okay, sure. And if you guys want to get email updates about any of our network's podcasts, you can sign up at www.geek2geekcast.net and tell us which shows you want updates about, and we will throw them your way whenever podcasts get published and
Oh, he went off script. He had it written out to a point, and it was perfect, and then he decided to add some more extra thoughts at the end, guys, and then he went way off.
I lost my mind. My mouth doesn't work if there aren't words in front of it. So
this is perfect.
Yes.
I love that you just dropped it in without telling me. This is a fantastically professional outro.
I was going to tell you
almost daily at Green Mushroom. No, it's not even Green Mushroom. It's a Green Mushroom. I know my own site. Oh, I'm not editing any of this out. I blog almost daily at agreenmushroom.com, and you can find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter. I also run the Video Game News Now podcast. With E3 coming up, things will get crazy. If you are interested in video game headline news done very quickly, I think my longest episode was 6 minutes so far. Usually they're about 3. Check me out. I'm on all the major services, Video Game News Now.
And I'm on Twitter as at Professor Beej. That's Beej with the 2 E's that I stole from his green mushroom. And I host the Geek Fitness Health Hacks podcast, which is new last week. Yay! So we've got 3 episodes up. I've got 3 episodes up, I should say. And you can find them in all the normal podcast places. Subscribe. And you can also find them at my blog, geekfitness.net. And specifically at geekfitness.net/podcast.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek to Geek podcast. This is going to be a fun one to edit. That'll do it for this week. See you next week, geeks.
Bye, guys.